Nobody told you it was going to end. You were not paying attention to the calendar. You were busy being a child in the most specific way possible, the way only children of a particular decade in a particular country can be, surrounded by things so ordinary they were invisible, so common you never thought to memorize them. Then one day they were gone, not all at once. Gradually, the way the light changes in late afternoon without your noticing until suddenly the room is dark and you cannot remember when it got that way. If you grew up in the United States in the 1950s, there are 15 things in this video that you did, that you ate, that you saw, that you touched. Things so completely gone from American life that a child born today cannot be made to understand they ever existed. Not because they are complicated, because the world that made them possible no longer exists. If you have never subscribed to this channel, do it now, because these things deserve to be remembered. We are going through all 15. Stay until the end. I have a challenge for you. Let us begin. Number 1, the screen door. Every American house in the 1950s had one. A lightweight wood or aluminum door with a screen stretched across the middle, mounted on a spring that pulled it shut automatically after you passed through it. The sound it made when it slapped closed behind you, a flat, sharp smack that echoed across the back porch and traveled halfway down the street, is one of the most distinctly American sounds of the 20th century, and it is almost entirely gone from modern homes now. You went in and out of the screen door 40 times a day in summer. You let it slam because the spring pulled it faster than a child's attention could follow, and your mother called after you every time, and you did not slow down, and the door slammed again on your way back out 10 minutes later. The screen door kept the flies out while letting the air in. This was its entire purpose. It required no electricity. It required no maintenance beyond replacing the screen when it wore through. It cost almost nothing. It worked perfectly. Modern homes have central air conditioning, which requires all windows and doors to be sealed shut to function. The screen door is incompatible with central air. When air conditioning became standard, the screen door stopped making sense, and with it went the sound, that flat, echoing smack that was the background music of every 1950s summer afternoon. Number 2, the icebox man. Before every American home had an electric refrigerator, there was the icebox, a heavy wooden cabinet lined with metal and insulated with cork, designed to hold a large block of ice in the upper compartment that kept the food in the lower compartments cold. And twice a week a man came to your house with a block of ice. He drove a truck with an open back. He used large iron tongs to lift a block weighing anywhere from 25 to 50 pounds, swung it onto a rubber pad on his shoulder, and carried it through your kitchen door without breaking pace. He opened the top of the ice box, settled the block into place, closed the lid, and was gone in under 2 minutes. The Iceman was one of the most reliable presences in a 1950s neighborhood. Families left cards in the front window indicating how many pounds they needed that week. A card turned one way meant 25 pounds. Turned the other way meant 50. The Iceman read the card from the street without stopping the truck. Electric refrigerators replaced the icebox through the late 1940s and into the 1950s, and by 1955, over 90% of American homes had one. The Iceman's route shrank year by year, house by house. One morning, he simply did not come anymore, and the window card had no one left to read it. If you are still watching, and if you remember any of these, please subscribe before we continue. This channel exists to remember exactly these things. Number 3, greeting cards sent for every occasion. In 1950, Americans sent approximately 4 billion greeting cards per year. Not emails, not text messages, not a quick post to someone's social media page. Paper cards selected from a rack at the drugstore or the Five and Dime, signed by hand, addressed by hand, stamped, and mailed. There was a card for every occasion, and every occasion required a card. Not just birthdays and Christmas. Get well soon, sympathy. Congratulations on a new baby. Congratulations on a new job. Thinking of you. Just wanted to say hello. A grandmother who did not receive a card on her birthday felt the absence as a real thing. The card was not optional. It was the evidence that you had taken the time. Hallmark was founded in 1910. By the 1950s, it operated hundreds of retail stores across the country. The act of buying a card, standing at the rack, reading the verses, choosing the right one, carrying it to the counter, was a ritual that took 15 minutes and communicated something that a 2-second digital reaction cannot communicate, regardless of how many hearts it includes. The greeting card still exists. The obligation to send one does not. And the grandmother who used to save every card she received in a shoebox under her bed, and who had hundreds of them organized by year, is not there to miss them anymore. Number 4, the knife sharpener's cart. He came through the neighborhood once a month, sometimes less. You heard him before you saw him, a bell or a whistle, sometimes a horn, announcing his presence from 2 blocks away. A man with a small cart or a bicycle mounted with a grinding wheel. He sharpened knives, scissors, garden shears, and any other blade a household had let go dull. He called out as he came down the street, scissors, knives, lawnmower blades, and mothers came out of the front door with their dull kitchen knives wrapped in a towel. The sharpening took under a minute per blade. Sparks flew from the grinding wheel as the edge was restored. The man handed the knife back, accepted a few coins, and moved on to the next house. He was gone in 10 minutes. Every neighborhood had one, operating on a circuit that repeated itself over weeks and months. Children followed the cart for half a block to watch the sparks. The knife that came back from the sharpener could slice a tomato without pressing down. This was considered remarkable, which tells you something about how accustomed people had become to working with dull knives. Disposable everything ended the knife sharpener's cart. When knives became cheap enough to replace rather than maintain, there was no longer any reason to sharpen them. The man with the grinding wheel and the bell stopped coming, and the sound he made, that particular bell on that particular morning, went with him. Number 5, Sunday clothes. In the 1950s, a child had 2 wardrobes, everyday clothes worn to school and during the week, which were not particularly special and were allowed to get dirty and worn, and Sunday clothes, a completely separate set of garments, kept cleaner, kept more carefully, and reserved exclusively for church, for visiting relatives, and for any occasion designated by a parent as company is coming. Sunday clothes were not negotiable. You put them on Sunday morning without being asked twice. You did not play in them. You sat still in them during the church service, and you kept them on through Sunday dinner, and you changed out of them the moment your mother released you from the requirement. A boy's Sunday suit was bought slightly large and worn for several years as he grew into it and then out of it. A girl's Sunday dress was pressed carefully on Saturday evening, hanging from the door frame overnight, ready to put on in the morning without a wrinkle. The concept of clothing is something reserved for specific occasions, something you only wore when it mattered, something that communicated by its presence that this moment was not ordinary, has almost completely disappeared from American life. Casual Friday spread throughout the work week and into Sunday morning and eventually into every occasion that once required dressing up. The child who wore Sunday clothes to church understood something about the distinction between ordinary time and sacred time that casual clothes cannot teach. Number 6, mending and darning. Nothing was thrown away if it could be fixed. A sock with a hole in the heel was not discarded. Your mother darned it, stretching it over a smooth wooden egg designed for exactly this purpose, weaving new thread over the gap with a needle until the hole was closed and the sock could be worn again. She did this in the evening while listening to the radio or watching television. It was not remarkable. It was Tuesday. A shirt with a worn collar was not discarded. The collar was turned, removed, reversed, and reattached so the unworn side faced out. The shirt lasted another year. A coat with a torn lining was relined. A dress with a frayed hem was recut shorter. A pair of trousers with a broken zipper was fitted with a new zipper. The woman who could not sew was at a disadvantage in a 1950s household. The ability to mend was not a hobby. It was a practical skill as necessary as cooking, closer to carpentry than to art. The maintenance of the household's material goods against the steady pressure of ordinary wear. Cheap disposable clothing ended darning. When a new pair of socks costs less than the time required to mend the old ones, mending stops making economic sense. The darning egg went into the back of the sewing drawer, and eventually into a donation box, and eventually out of circulation entirely. There are people alive today who own darning eggs inherited from grandmothers. Most of them do not know what the object is for. Number 7, the Fuller brush man at the back door. He came to the back door, not the front. The front door was for guests and strangers. The back door was for deliveries and for people who belonged to the fabric of the neighborhood's daily life. The milkman, the bread man, the egg man, and the Fuller brush man. He carried a sample case. He was neat, well-mannered, and always addressed your mother by name after the first visit. He sold household brushes for every conceivable surface and purpose, brushes for dishes and floors and clothing and hair and vegetables, and every kind of cleaning that a 1950s household required. But he also gave something away free on every visit, a small sample, usually a miniature brush or a cloth or a small tin of polish. The free sample was the strategy. It worked because the thing he gave away was useful, not a gimmick. A small brush for cleaning vegetable peelers was something your mother would use for the next 10 years. The Fuller Brush Company employed over 5,000 salesmen at its peak. Each one assigned a specific territory of residential streets that he covered on foot, knocking on back doors, building relationships with households that lasted years. Door-to-door salesmanship of this kind ended with the two-income household. When no one was home on weekday mornings, there was no one to answer the back door. The Fuller Brush Man's territory gradually emptied of its customers, and one by one his routes became impossible, and he did not come any more. Number 8. The newspaper on the front porch. Every morning before the family woke up, the newspaper was on the front porch. A paper boy had thrown it from a bicycle sometime before 6 in the morning. On a good throw, it landed on the porch dry and folded. On a bad throw, or on a rainy morning, your father retrieved it from the front walk or from the bushes alongside it, shaking off the water. Your father read the newspaper at the kitchen table with his coffee before leaving for work. He did not read it on a phone. He did not look at a screen. He unfolded a large paper newspaper and read it with 2 hands, the pages making a specific sound when he turned them, and the print sometimes left a faint residue on his fingertips that he wiped on a napkin. The newspaper was the only source of local news most families had. The birth announcements, the obituaries, the school honor rolls, the letters to the editor. If it was not in the newspaper, it did not exist to most of the neighborhood. People were born and died and achieved things, and the newspaper was the record. The paper boy threw the newspaper and collected his payment once a week, going door to door on Saturday morning with a small account book. You paid him cash. He counted the change from a leather pouch on his belt. The newspaper still exists. The front porch delivery, the paper boy on the bicycle, the leather change pouch, the sound of a large folded newspaper being snapped open over a kitchen table. Those exist now only in the memory of the people who read this channel. Number 9, the clothesline. Behind every house in the 1950s, strung between 2 wooden poles or from the house to a garage, was a clothesline. You washed the laundry in the washing machine, an electric wringer washer or later a more modern model, and you carried the wet clothes in a basket to the backyard and hung them on the line with wooden clothespins. Sheets made the most dramatic display. A full-sized bed sheet on a clothesline on a windy day, filled with air and billowed and snapped and moved like something alive. Children ran through sheets hanging on the line when their mothers were not watching. They smelled, when they came in from the line, of air and sun, a specific smell that no dryer sheet has ever successfully replicated, because no dryer sheet can replicate what the smell actually was, which was outdoor air and ultraviolet light. The automatic clothes dryer replaced the clothesline through the 1950s and 1960s. By 1970, most American households had one. The clothesline became optional, then old-fashioned, then largely absent from the new subdivisions and apartment complexes where most Americans began living. There are neighborhoods today where clotheslines are prohibited by homeowner association rules on the grounds that they make the neighborhood look poor. Number 10, the ice cream social. Once or twice each summer, the church held an ice cream social. You did not need to belong to the church. The ice cream social was for the entire neighborhood. Long folding tables were set up in the church hall or in the churchyard. Families brought homemade ice cream in hand-cranked freezers, the kind that required someone, usually a child, to sit on top of the machine and hold it steady while an adult turned the handle. The freezer was packed with ice and rock salt. It took 20 minutes of cranking to freeze the custard inside. There were flavors you could not find anywhere else. Peach ice cream made with peaches from someone's backyard tree. Strawberry made with strawberries picked that morning. Vanilla made with real vanilla and cream so thick, the frozen result was almost too rich to eat in large amounts. You paid nothing or very little. You ate ice cream at a folding table next to people you had known your whole life, and a few people you did not know yet but would. Children ran around the edges of the gathering until they were called back to eat. The evening ended when the ice cream ran out. The ice cream social was not organized by anyone in particular. It happened because people who lived near each other believed they owed each other a summer evening of shared pleasure. That belief, specific, unprogrammed, not requiring an app, is what has disappeared more than the ice cream itself. Number 11, the root beer stand. Before the national fast food chains absorbed the drive-in restaurant concept into something standardized and branded, there was the local root beer stand, a small building, often octagonal, sometimes just a walk-up window in a larger structure, with a large root beer sign mounted on a pole above it. You drove up. A car hop came to your window, and you ordered root beer served in a frosted mug, a heavy glass mug that had been stored in a freezer, and arrived at your window with a thin layer of ice on the outside. The root beer was made from syrup and carbonated water combined at the stand, not poured from a bottle. It was colder and sharper and more complex than bottled root beer. The frosted mug made it colder still. Drinking root beer from a frosted mug at a drive-in stand on a hot summer evening in 1957 was a specific experience that required all of those elements: the mug, the temperature, the car, the evening, the stand itself, and the absence of any one of them produces something that is not the same thing at all. Most local root beer stands were gone by 1975. The national chains, with their economies of scale and their standardized cups, made them impossible to compete with. The frosted mug could not survive a paper cup economy. Number 12, the radio drama. Before television took the living room, radio held it. On weekday evenings and Saturday mornings, families gathered around the radio the way they would later gather around the television, in the same chairs, in the same arrangement, at the same times each week. The programs had the same structure as television programs: opening theme music, sponsor announcements, characters the audience knew by name, dramatic or comic situations that resolved within the half hour. But there was nothing to look at. The story existed entirely in sound. The sound effects man produced every effect by hand: footsteps by walking in place on a wooden box, thunder by shaking a sheet of metal, rain by pouring dry rice on a drum. The actors performed into microphones in a studio, and the sound traveled into living rooms across the country, where families supplied the visual details from imagination alone. Children who grew up on radio drama had a specific kind of imaginative capacity, the ability to construct a complete visual world from sound and description alone, that television does not develop because it does all the visual work for you. The radio drama ended not because it was bad, but because television was easier. You could sit in front of the television and not think. Radio required you to do half the work. The half that television took away from you was the more valuable half. Number 13, decorating the house for every holiday, not just Christmas, every holiday. In a 1950s American household, Halloween meant paper witches and cardboard skeletons cut out and taped to the front windows, and a jack-o'-lantern on the porch carved that afternoon by the children with supervision. Thanksgiving meant construction paper, pilgrims and paper turkeys made by children brought home from school and displayed on the mantel with the same seriousness as any decoration. Valentine's Day meant a paper heart wreath on the front door. Easter meant a basket of dyed eggs displayed in the center of the kitchen table for the week. None of these decorations cost anything significant. Most were made by children from construction paper and paste and craft supplies kept in a box on the second shelf of the hall closet. The making of them was the point as much as the displaying of them. A child who cut out paper pumpkins for 2 hours on an October afternoon was doing something, investing time and attention in the marking of a season that a decoration purchased from a store cannot replicate, regardless of how expensive it is. The homemade holiday decoration assumed that the people in the house had time to make things, that children were expected to participate in making them, and that the result of that making was worth displaying even if it was crooked and imperfect. These assumptions have become unusual enough to seem remarkable when they appear. Number 14, the handshake deal. Business was done on a handshake. A man bought a car from another man who lived in the next town. They agreed on a price, shook hands, and the deal was done. No lawyer, no contract, no notarization, a handshake. Your father contracted with a neighbor to repair the roof. They agreed on a price and a start date in a conversation on the front porch that lasted 10 minutes. The neighbor showed up on the agreed morning and fixed the roof and was paid in cash when the job was done. No written agreement. A man borrowed a piece of farm equipment from another man and returned it when he was done, and sometimes brought something in return: a jar of preserves, a bag of vegetables, an hour of labor on something the lender needed done. The transaction had no paperwork. The handshake deal required one thing that no contract can replace: the belief that the person across from you would do what he said he would do, not because a piece of paper required it, but because that was what a man was. That belief was not naive. It was social infrastructure, maintained by proximity, by the knowledge that you would see this person at church on Sunday, and at the hardware store on Thursday, and at the July 4th picnic in August. The legal apparatus that replaced the handshake arrived with the collapse of that proximity. When you no longer live among the people you do business with, a handshake cannot hold. Number 15, staying home. When you were sick. When a child was sick in the 1950s, the child stayed home from school. This was not remarkable. The child was sick. You stayed home. Your mother took your temperature with a glass thermometer that she shook down with a sharp wrist snap before placing it under your tongue for 3 minutes. She read it by holding it up to the light and rotating it slowly until the mercury line became visible. She reported the result, 99.4, with an authority and finality that was complete. You spent the day on the couch under a wool blanket. The television was on because being sick was one of the few occasions a child was permitted to watch television during the day. Your mother brought you dry toast and ginger ale with the fizz partly gone, because fizzy ginger ale was too much for a stomach that was not well. By 2 p.m, when you were feeling better, the boredom set in. You were not sick enough to sleep. You were not well enough to go outside. You lay under the wool blanket and watched daytime television and waited for the afternoon to end. This is not described as something wonderful. It was ordinary. It was boring and slightly uncomfortable, and it lasted longer than you wanted it to. But it was yours, completely. A day out of time, neither school day nor weekend, with your own house quiet around you, and your mother moving through it, doing the things she did every day that you normally never saw, and the particular afternoon light of a weekday coming through the front window onto the living room floor. That specific experience, the sick day as a child at home in a house where a parent was always present, is one of the things most completely gone from American childhood. 15 things, 15 pieces of a world that existed completely, and then, gradually, did not. Not because anyone decided to end them, because the conditions that made them possible changed. The neighborhoods, the economics, the pace, the expectation that someone would always be home, and that people who lived near each other would be known to each other. The screen door needed a house where the windows could be open. The ice cream social needed a neighborhood that believed in gathering. The handshake deal needed people who would see each other again. The sick day at home needed a parent who was there. None of these things were extraordinary when they existed. They were Tuesday. They were the background of a life being lived without any awareness that it would someday be the past. You were there. That is not nothing. That is everything. Here is my challenge. This week, tell one person under 30 about one thing from this list, not to make them feel bad about what they missed, just to tell them, just to say, this existed, and it was ordinary, and it mattered. And then come back here and tell me in the comments which one you told them about, and what they said when you described it. I read every single comment. The vanished kitchen. Some flavors deserve to be remembered.